filmmaker left a post on Facebook about a gender-neutral bathroom, and what he said isn't sitting well with a lot of people. Channel 11's Jillian Hartman joins us live with the fallout from the controversial comments. Hey, Jillian.
Hey there. Well, tonight a local state representative here in Butler County is getting a lot of backlash online. It's over his controversial comments about a gender-neutral bathroom at a restaurant here down the road at 228. Tonight, Republican State Representative Aaron Bernstein is under fire for his recent Facebook post bashing a gender-neutral bathroom at Noodles & Company on 228 in Cranberry Township. In the post shared Thursday night, Bernstein wrote, quote, "When there is one of these in a restaurant and I have to try to explain to my 6-year-old what it means after telling him that some people want to be different than what God made them, he said, well, that's stupid." The post received a lot of mixed reaction with more than 500 Facebook comments at last check. Bernstein represents the 10th district for the state's House of Representatives, which includes Beaver, Butler, and Lawrence County. The post also read, quote, "Instead of just putting a sign up that says restroom, they're trying to force this liberal agenda down our throats while indoctrinating kids." Bernstein then added he won't be eating at the restaurant anymore. "I reached out to Noodles & Company," the communications manager said. "At Noodles & Company, we care for all team members, guests, and communities we serve. And we want to be sure that everyone feels comfortable and included when visiting with us. To ensure full accessibility to all members of the community, Noodles locations having restrooms with individual stalls will be converted to gender-neutral restrooms throughout 2021. Now, tonight we reached out to Aaron Bernstein, but he declined to do an interview with us. Reporting live tonight in Cranberry Township, I'm Jillian Hartman, Channel 11 News.
Another Pittsburgh